Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Inshallah, you're doing well. Thank you so much for joining this afternoon for our first edition talk on our Flip the Script series for Mental Health Awareness Month. Inshallah, we will be joining the readers of my book pieces in the next few days, inshallah, starting with Dr. Tamara Gray of Rabata today, alhamdulillah. Once she joins, inshallah, we'll get started. You can learn a bit more about her and also learn more about the book pieces. And in this way, we can actually learn about what the readers have to say to the author, inshallah. So, inshallah, once Auntie Tamara signs on and requests to join, we can, inshallah, begin the conversation. I do want to acknowledge and let everyone know here that the Houston community did go through a very difficult tragedy Thursday morning, and we're keeping Sister Sadia Manzoor, her daughter Khadija, and her mother in our prayers. May being Mental Health Awareness Month is a time that we know we can all think about and reflect on how we all may need care and to make getting care less of a stigma in our community, inshallah. So if you do feel in this conversation at any point that you need to step away, please feel free to do that. We will be discussing mental health. We will be discussing a family, specifically a character in the family going through mental health struggles. So please tread, inshallah, carefully and with grace. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And we will welcome now onto our live, inshallah. So for those of you who would like to be reintroduced, Dr. Tamara Gray is now here. Welcome, Auntie Tamara. She is our Executive Director and Chief Spirituality Officer at Rabata. Rabata is a global nonprofit organization dedicated to creating positive cultural change. I am a very proud full-time staff member there and work as the Director of Development under Auntie Tamara's leadership. So alhamdulillah, I'm really excited, Auntie Tamara, that you volunteered to be the very first interviewee in our Flipped the Script series. Welcome.
I was dying to be. I didn't have to be first, but I really wanted to be a reader interview because I don't want to be interviewed here as, executive director of Rabata or Auntie Tamara. I want to be interviewed here as the person who read the book.
Absolutely, yes. As a speed reader, we are all so very well aware that your insight will be really interesting. So let's dive right in, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. When was the first time you read pieces? Let's journey back to your journey with the book.
Oh, well, because I wasn't really part of the editing process, but early on, I had seen your outline and I had seen, because I was part of the project, I had read a really short, almost essay-like version at the beginning, which is maybe one of the reasons why I love it so much. Excuse me. But the reason I say that is because when I actually read the book the first time as a reader, which was after it was printed and published in this beautiful cover that you have, mashallah, it was a brand new book. I mean, it's really an interesting process with you because you as an author started out with a very short version. I don't know, maybe you'll tell us. Like, I feel like I'm the reader now. I want to interview the author, but I don't, that's not how it's supposed to be.
What we're doing.
But I'm interested, like that path of writing. So many people think they can't write because they can't get enough out, or they think they don't have a story inside of them. And mashallah, like your story was short, it was interesting, but when it became a book, I have to say that I was really moved by your ability to bring us as the reader inside of your character's heads. And that is what, I mean, I love it. I love your ability to do that. And I think you should write more books.
Absolutely. Inshallah, there are definitely more coming up. And I love that you referenced the being in different characters' heads, because the cool thing about pieces that I think across age ranges of readers really enjoy is that flipping into the different narrative with a different chapter. So every chapter is from the perspective of a different family member, and they rotate, which is super exciting. And when you go ahead.
Can you say something about that? So sorry, but I think it's really as a reader for your topic, because your topic is, I don't know how many, I don't want to do any spoilers, but this sort of mental health PTSD issue. And your choice for the reader, your choice as an author to have every chapter going into the head and going into the story of all the other characters was brilliant. Because what happens then is that then I get to read a story, but on it, there's a whole nother level where as a reader, I'm able to share in the shared experience of PTSD or a mental health issue. And I think that for me, as someone who in my generation, we didn't talk a lot about mental health issues when I was young. And this is not because I lived in Syria. This is even when I was young here in the United States. And we even though in my family I had an aunt, God bless her and forgive her, who did have schizophrenia, and so we had mental health issues in my family, but we didn't really talk about them. And yet, if I look back, I realize that her life impacted us in different ways, even without talking about it very much. And so you're doing that in the book, going into the head of every person, into the story of every person, really demonstrated or showed for the reader how mental health issues is not just about that individual person. And it's not even only about sort of stereotypical impact, like codependency and all these things that people talk about, but there's a lot of other impact that is multifaceted and very nuanced often, which you can't read about in a textbook. You're not going to read about it in an article. And I would say I would say that the learning of that, one of the best places to really learn about that and sort of sink in and be a helper to a person who is having a mental health crisis is to read a book like yours, because my personal understanding grew from reading your book. And I hope I became more sensitive to different people's experiences of mental health crises, either personal or family. So sorry to jump in there, but it's not just exciting what you did as far as I wouldn't use the word exciting, actually, that each character, I would use, it's a very not unique. It was the absolute right way to tell this story, because that's how the story is told so much differently when you can look not at what everyone's thinking all the time, but what everyone is thinking and doing individually in each chapter.
Absolutely. Feedback is amazing. As the author, I found it, yes, very transformative for someone like yourself and readers, and just kind of digging into those nuances of exchange. And like you mentioned, that there's a lot that is left to be learned, especially from the Muslim community perspective as well. People of faith, people who pray regularly, people who may not necessarily feel that they fit into a particular mold, whether they themselves have a mental health situation or they're caring for someone. So we hear things like caretaker burnout. We hear about things that have to do with grief and losing someone that you used to know, that used to be someone before they have a mental health situation that they're struggling with. And so that whole journey is really interesting to have explored as the author, but I love that, you got to experience it as the reader and have such beautiful feedback.
And also just the multi-generational experience. So the kids in school and their reactions and interactions to how they feel about their father's experience, whether in hospital or not, whether in school or not. Yeah, it was really it's a really good book. It's a really good book. Everyone who's watching here should buy this book and buy it as gifts for people, because it's a whole nother. I tell you something else I like about it. I know you have a whole list of questions you want to ask me, so maybe I should just be jumping in. And I was excited to talk about the book, so that's why. But something that really I've been thinking about your book is that the perception of mental health or mental illness in our community, in the Muslim community, is somewhere, maybe, I mean, this is anecdotal, but it seems to be somewhere in between that which is very personal. In other words, I need a mental health. Someone might say, I need a mental health day, or someone might be feeling exhausted, or someone might be feeling some kind of personal, temporary feelings. And the other side of that perception of mental health that I've experienced amongst people seems to be the extreme repercussions of what mental illness can do to a family. And what's really interesting about your story is that it offers another road of understanding, and really an important one, because this is a real other road. It's a real possibility. And that is the road of compassion and the road of families that it's almost like you really are able to you really were able to, it's not almost like, you were able to present this mental illness as a stressor to the family in the same way that cancer might be a stressor to the family. And I think we still as a community struggle to understand that that is the majority of how mental health shows up, or mental illness shows up in family situations. It's not necessarily just these two extremes that I seem to hear us talking about, either just very personally, I'm feeling tired, I'm feeling not, a very personal me kind of thing, or the very extreme, terrible stories of really very serious repercussions of mental health problems. I feel like it's in the middle somewhere. It's more realistic.
It definitely has a fitting where anyone in the community can read it and go, okay, I have something that I can connect with and take back with, in terms of just reading about it, whether it's a middle school student or a high school student or someone in their middle age or someone who's gone through a similar type crisis in, like you said, a different format, someone who's taken care of or been around a family member with cancer. And like any illness, some things are very overt and obvious, but sometimes it's not. It's not a broken leg that people can carry around with crutches and a big cast saying, I'm ill right now. And it's something that definitely other family members have to carry forward with them too.
And yes, and I love the way the book presents that and recognizes that everyone is carrying something. So there's carrying going on. You don't sort of wash over that and pretend like, oh, mashallah, this is nothing. This is a duty. This is not a didactic sort of silly book. It really looks at and recognizes the difficulty of carrying the burden of someone else's illness, while at the same time loving that person and wanting to be there for them, but yet recognizing that it's a burden. Very complicated feelings that you were really able to express really well.
It was interesting to explore those emotions through the characters because they also were grappling with something new. So none of them really had a roadmap. They were all discovering individually and even as a family how to proceed, but they still had their own just takeaways and their own ways of navigating that.
So awesome.
It is, yeah, it was amazing. Yet again, now that you've gotten me so excited about it. But in terms of the characters, was there someone who resonated with you the most? I'm curious as the author now.
I think so. I had a couple of different experiences with this book as a reader. One, I mentioned earlier, I don't actually talk a lot about this because my aunt was diagnosed with schizophrenia before I was born. So it was not, it was something that sort of, I think the drama or the crisis of it happened before I was born. And so I grew up and that was just my aunt, I didn't really, it took me a while in growing up to recognize, to know, a long time my family didn't talk about what's going on with Aunt Janet. But so on one hand, I was reading your book with almost compassion for the younger. Can you remind? I'm not good with names of human beings. So how about
The youngest
what was
daughter,
her, what was her
Hannah.
name?
Hannah.
And Hannah, yeah. So on one hand, I was watching their interaction with this and sort of thinking about my own childhood growing up with an aunt who was struggled her whole life. It's a tragic story, actually. It's a very tragic story. It's her. I was born in the 60s, so her mental health crisis happened before I was born. And it wasn't a pretty place back then in the world of mental health. Everyone tried to do the best they could for her, but it wasn't necessarily good for her. And so there's a lot of pain around that. And as a child, my own reactions to that were very much based in the lack of health in the field anyway. So it was really interesting to be watching Hannah. So I identified with Hannah, but even though the experience was completely different, and watched her interact with everything that was going on in her way. And then at the same time, we have PTSD in my family, and just to be private about that, I'm not going to mention who. But and so when I was in the head with you of the father, I was just taken. I'm doing an IG live. Old person coming into the house. You won't be seen. Just don't be too loud. I really think that. Oh, so sorry. Back. So especially the crisis occurred, you did such a good job of that. You did such a good job of getting the reader inside the head of the father and his character and what was happening to him during the crisis. And it made me, I really was there, and made me so much more compassionate. Yeah, Afshan's book, yeah. It's a good book. My daughter, the capital C critic of all books, has said it's a good book. That's high compliment, high praise. But yeah, so to answer your question, that particular scene, I really identified with, as in, I don't know if I identified with is the right word, but I really, it was helpful to me to walk in that space and then have a better understanding of what PTSD does to people and what it can do and how serious it really is. Because people throw it around sometimes, this phrase, and even when I talk about our ummah, and I throw out post-colonial stress disorder. I like make things up like that around there. And it's not necessarily I'm making them up. We have some serious issues in our ummah that need to be taken care of. But it was very different to read your book in a very personal way and really think about what does that do to someone who has PTSD and how does it impact their life, and how does it impact their life differently. That was another cool thing that you have, because another thing for a person who isn't in that mental health space, that mental illness space, we don't always understand that it's not steady. Like we think about a person having a cold or the flu, that it's just steady. They got the flu, now they're better. But very often in mental health or mental illness cases, you've got periods of wellness marked with periods of intensity. And so you did that really well as in the book as well, where it wasn't even that much of a seesaw. It wasn't necessarily wellness and intensity. It was demonstrating how illness and then an intensity and how those went together. Awesome.
I love that reflection. Yeah, it was definitely something to experience. I think in firsthand situations where I've observed people who have gone through mental health crises, and also having the book read as a beta reader by someone who also is, undergoing mental health situations. That input, especially by a male beta reader, was really interesting too, because then they're also grappling with a different set of situations where they used to be this head of the household, strong, firm family member, and now they're basically helpless, dependent on the people that they used to have depend on them. And that kind of, you see slivers of that throughout the book as well in terms of the family dynamic as he goes through his ups and downs. So in the book, was there a particular scene that you felt you carried with afterwards, or something that struck you in terms of what made this book memorable for you?
It was the crisis scene.
Mm-hmm.
for sure, the crisis scene is the one that lives with the reader. You may put that book down, you're gonna hold that crisis scene.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, I got to be careful because I don't want to do spoilers. People have to read the book to get the crisis scene. But
Yeah.
definitely, just
I,
absolutely, yeah.
I love spoilers, so I do have to be careful when talking about it. Alhamdulillah. And um did you leave the book after you read it? And I know you're a speed reader and you probably read through the book very quickly, but was there a lingering emotion that you carried with you afterwards? Or was there a mood that you felt you had after reading the book?
Yes. There were a number of them. So when you keep saying I'm speed readers, I just wanted to say something about that. So I am a fast reader. I can speed read when I want to, and I do a lot of speed reading when I'm doing informational reading. And I have been known to speed read through novels, especially if I have to read the novel for some reason. But I don't have a recollection of speed reading through your book, which is a compliment by itself. That being said, the question of what lingered, the emotion that lingered with me, I think it was there are complicated emotions that lingered with me. On one hand, I don't want spoilers, but on one hand, the feeling of the end is what it is, and so the emotion that results from the end. Wow, that's the most lovely book. I don't want to say what it is, then it tells what the going on in the book. Was definitely lingered, and it also because of the way it ends, and because of the way you've got that ending and the emotion that results from it, it offers a real satisfying read, but it also gives the opportunity to revisit the earlier emotions of the book, if that makes sense. So and the earlier emotions of the book were both the ones I kind of already talked about, both the feelings, the emotion of walking with the father in his crisis, and also identifying with the younger, and the mother. I feel like I should say I identified with her. I didn't so much as I don't know. I saw her, I saw what she was trying to do, and I got stressed out for everything she was carrying. It's so stressful.
Typical women who are carrying a lot of six things.
I mean, she's awesome. She's an awesome character. It was very stressful for me because maybe because I could just see myself if I were ever in that situation, just the carrying that she had to do. We all do it. We all carry our families, and we do it with love. And in the midst of it, I don't think we always know how much stress we're under. But I could be outside watching her and knowing how much stress she was under, and just be like, oh, exhausting. So I think one lingering emotion from her was exhaustion.
Yeah, it must have been really tiring to be her, but it was interesting to paint that picture. I remember a really young reader in the beginning said, "Oh, like I never thought to put myself in my mom's shoes," because she was doing all of her mom type and all the fun things that she had going on, but throughout this really intense situation. So that was, I mean, I love that feedback of being eye-opening with the different characters. And now that we're kind of rounding up to our half-hour spot, did you now have any lingering questions after you finished the book?
What's next? Yeah, well, definitely what's next. So what's next? Before that, I have a question I would like to ask you. What inspired you to write a book about a mental health crisis and a family dealing with mental health issues and mental illness? What was the inspiration for you as an author? And yeah, then my next question will be what's next?
All right. Well, it was a multifaceted inspiration. I grew up reading a lot of different genre of books. I used to read Christian lit, like young adult Christian literature. I used to read books by Lurleen McDaniel. If you're familiar with her, she is very popular as a YA author, middle grade books, but she would write specifically about kids who had cancer and kids who were going through terminal illnesses. So I would devour those books because they were just about everyday kids that I would see amongst my classmates and things like that. But they were going through such difficult situations personally. So when I would read these books, I would say, wow, this is what leukemia is like behind the scenes for a 13-year-old, or this is what this person going through chemo has to go through. Their hair falls out, they look in the mirror, they don't recognize the person that's there. So all of that I felt was very formative in my younger years, because I got to bridge those, points of compassion in situations that, I didn't come across as a 13-year-old often. But once, for example, there was a classmate in middle school or even later in elementary school, who was giving herself injections because she had diabetes. And I said, wow, I kind of know what she must be feeling, or what she had gone through, like the testing, the blood work, that sort of thing, just by reading. And then as I got older, I felt that there were definitely ways the Muslim community has not been represented in literature. And while I love romance and happy endings and fun. And so that's my go-to when I come to, I need just like a no-break.
Right? You're writing a romance. Is that what you just said?
I might have to write a romance. It'd be the halal harlequins of what we can offer. And I might have to collaborate with our Nasiba on that. But
I out here requesting a romance from you. Demanding.
Okay, all right, we'll work on it. I'll write the blueprint, but that's how I work. I get the blueprint and then I fluff it up. But
you're a fast writer, mashallah. This is something, and you do everything fast, I know, but also fast. You're a fast writer. Oh yeah, August. She have it done by June. Are you kidding?
Yeah. So she wants me to ever read it before August. Probably.
Request is noted. I'm putting it down on my calendar after our live. But I felt that after watching a lot of videos, for example, of doctors who had experienced trauma overseas, they had gone to help with situations with Doctors Without Borders, or even different organizations, and they came back for interviews. So with Facebook and things like that, you get to read and see the facial expressions of people who have gone through these life-changing experiences, come back, and then be back in the real world. But you can tell they haven't necessarily still stuff they're carrying. And I really wondered how that would transform that story and evolve it. It was really cool. Hansel, thank you so much, Auntie Tamara, for this fantastic Flip the Script Live. How did you enjoy being interviewed as the reader?
It's so fun. I don't think I've ever been interviewed as a reader before. And okay. I always have opinions about the things I read. So it's so much fun to have the opportunity to talk about them. So I know I heard Niseba, yelling out here about she wants to see romance from you. But for the real question is I really do have a question about what's next for you. Like, do you get burning stories, or do you have to look for stories, or what are you thinking?
I have a pretty great imagination, alhamdulillah. So I always have some thoughts in my head of this would be really interesting to explore. But I do love, for example, the short stories I've read before. So collections of short stories. Jhumpa Lahiri, for example, is a really fun author who, when her short stories, is so profound. Like you feel like you really walked away with something, and it's just a series of stories. So I was actually, I met someone a few times. I wanted to kind of explore how we have Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. I don't know that was a movie and a series of books, but maybe the traveling masbaha, and maybe an intergenerational exploration of this masbaha being either passed down from.
Oh, don't tell you. Stop. Someone's going to steal your idea. That's awesome. It gave me chills. I'm so excited. Very exciting.
And just add spiritual vibes.
I love it. Oh my gosh, a lot of cool stuff could come from that story. I'm just thinking about the karamat and the grief and the happiness and so exciting. I can't wait.
Inshallah. All right, but first the romance.
Get that, because that one you can just get done this weekend.
I think so.
Sorry, are you saying that romance is easier to write?
No, I'm saying that Afshan is so fast.
Okay.
And she can.
I thought I heard a little bit of
No. I have experienced Afshan's quickness, mashallah. The higher the challenge, the faster it gets written.
It'll save me from giving myself a root canal this weekend, so I might as well.
God bless you. Yeah, I mean, maybe it would be a very heart-wrenching romance. Of course, it has to have a happy ending to be a romance. I do know that. My daughter has taught me that. But there may be lots of pain in there, just reflecting from your tooth, I think.
They may be eating more than what I am now. Well, thank you so much, Auntie Tamara. This was fantastic for me. It's always a pleasure, alhamdulillah, hearing from you. And this is so much better than reading an Amazon review from a reader. Thank
so
you
much fun to share. It was so much fun. Thank you for inviting me to be your very first reader interview.
So, well, thank you so much, Nusayba. So we'll see you all, inshallah, for our next series of interviews. The flyer will be up on our page, and we'll see you then, inshallah. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barik ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you so much.